But anyway, that's my thoughts for today. AI agent revolution utilizing Clawbot. You can create a 24/7 AI agent that can work on your behalf. You have to make sure you put in the proper security parameters to do so. There has been a mode book, which is an AI agent social media, which essentially allow the AI agents to communicate with themselves. It's very dangerous because we don't know what these AI agents can do. They created their own language to be able to speak on and speak to themselves. They created their own religion, philosophies. They're fixing their own bugs and programs, and some of them are even doxing and socially engineering their human counterparts that own them. They have access to financial information to where they can create cryptocurrencies and things of that nature. It's a very interesting thing. And then, of course, you had the Epstein list that just dropped, and it just basically said that it's a bunch of satanic evil devils, evil white devils, let me say that. Because we stopped using the word white devils, and I understand why we stopped using it, right? Because devil is just a representation of its level of left brain consciousness and this monkey mind, this cold cognition, cold calculating devils that can never live in harmony with the planet Earth. They're consistently aggressive, right, and dominating. And their particular aggression is different because it's ideological aggression, something that has never been done on the planet until these devils did it. So even as they try to talk about chattel slavery, and slavery's been done before, it has never been this ideological slavery where you hate a people, right, because of just what they look like and how they think. This is a whole new level, and it's been going on for a very long time because we're dealing with Neanderthals that come from a cold climate. When they were being developed genetically, right, they were developed with a very cold mindset. And so ICE is just a representation and extinction and also some level of distraction at the same time, right? But you have to deal with all of the fires. You feel me? So, this is the current state of the world. And the only question that you should be having yourself ask is, what are you building? Right? And how is that affecting the next 5 to 10 years? Because if we're not looking forward, 5 to 10 years forward, everything that we're doing is in this bubble of reaction. And that makes it containment and that makes it controllable. But if we start focusing 5 to 10 years out, then we break out what I call the temporal prison, which is a prison of time that keeps you stuck in the present and or the past. And as long as you can do that, then they have an edge on you, because people who are in survival mode that grew up in the cold climate areas, they focus on the future a lot because they didn't have the luxury of having farming and agriculture and harvesting and being in harmony and attunement with the land. So they had to focus on the future, what was always coming next. How do we plan to make sure that we survive in the future? And so I think that Caucasoids have a very, high cognitive ability of planning in the future. And it's something that we have to focus on because that's where they end up winning. So we end up having wins in the present, right? And of course, we find our identity, our communal relation towards each other by our connections of our past. Because especially with Black America, we are a historical nation, right? And so, yes, we can trace back to Africa as a genetic people, as all people can. But if we're looking at the last 500 years as a historical nation, that context does matter, right? And this is where, we as a warrior people have a very warm spirit, but then we have a very cold mind at the same time. And I think that you need both, right? And so I think this makes us position uniquely different. And if we miss it and we only utilize this cold mind for capitalism and making money and things of that nature and fitting in this industry for survival, then we lose the very uniqueness of what all of this suffering was for in the first place. It was to form us into a people that I believe ultimately goes to a level of mastery so we can never be conquered again. Now, will that happen in my lifetime? I don't know, because at the end of the day, it's a lot of hard-headed niggas. You feel me? But it doesn't mean I won't stop fighting. I won't stop building. I won't stop pushing that line until we get there, because I think it will come from our bloodline. It will come from our people. You feel me? So y'all stay sharp. Y'all stay building and be intentional about everything you do. The nature of this beast is distraction. It keeps your mind locked away from possibility by taking your mind in the present and trapping it, right? And stopping you from focusing on thinking about, producing a future. So if we don't control the image, then we don't control the imagination. That means that we don't have access to the future. So the next 5 years, it's a blank canvas. We don't know what it can be. We're looking to the next man that's actually planning to do for us what we should do for ourselves. And then last but not least, there are three things that are very important. It's the soldiers, the generals, and the funders. Oftentimes, the generals are lack with resources, so therefore they may have the ideas, and the people will be like, we need more than ideas, we need you to do this. But if they do not have the resources, then they cannot enact their plans, and or not in a timely manner and fashion in which it will allow them to actually be successful. Then you have the soldiers. We need people that's going to execute on the ground. You feel me? That's going to take the plans and put them into fruition, right? These are completely different people. Sometimes they can be the same depending on the resources. Then you need funders, those who are getting the money, that have the resources, that have access. This is why we need banks and things of that nature, because, right, without the funders, those money people, right, we can't get the resources to the generals. The generals then can't have the soldiers that work on the things that we need. And so I believe that this is one of the fundamental problems that we have, because we end up having a lot of generals and a lot of soldiers, right? And we have funders, but they're disconnected. There's a book in my book club that we're going to be reading, and it's about the first black millionaires in this country. And the first black millionaires in this country, you know, a lot of them were whaling millionaires, meaning that they got money from the oil whaling industry, and they had a lot of money, and they were very rich. And what they would do, some of them would even go down to the slave auctions, and they would buy the freedom of slaves, right? And set them free, or literally had them work for them, but not just like slaves. And it got to the point where they were revolutionary in their mind. Those funders, what they did was they heard Frederick Douglass speaking, or they might even hired him one time. And they said, how about you take this on the road across the country? And he said, man, ain't nobody gonna want to hear me talk this abolitionist, you feel me? And they be like, you never know. You feel me? And he said, it's more people than you can imagine, essentially. And then they funded him to be able to go around and have his abolitionist, you know, campaign and movement. And this is how those things were spreading. And so you have to understand that there's always been this level of interconnectedness between the money, the revolution, the soldiers, which today is kind of like the boule, you know, the visionary thought leaders in the streets. You feel me? And so what we've lost was this interconnectedness that makes it intentional. W.E.B. Du Bois had a magazine called The Crisis, and The Crisis was essentially us documenting and putting our voice to what was happening. There was one called The Black Scholar. There was the North Star. There was Muhammad Speaks, Final Newspaper, the Final Call. There was all of these points of media that we had to where we can control the messaging. And more important than ever in any day and age, having a single source of truth is important, because people don't know what to believe. And without that, then you have no direction. And it's just everybody just making decisions for themselves. And so individualism becomes, hyperactive and into this state of meaninglessness, to where we are consistently celebrating the accomplishments of the individual at the detriments of the collective. And then that's when the black excellence replaces black power, and it becomes anti-futurism, because it makes us feel that we're making progress while locking us out from the future and not building anything directionally. But as long as we can point to an individual having success, it actually gives us more hope. And this hope stops us from actually executing, because hope can be a trap, Hope can be a trap, because this hope fills this gap of this feeling. And I wrote, and I got to bring up my papers, and I'll put out the article in the Patreon. But hope can be a trap. It can make you feel, right, as if you have, more time. It can make you feel, this sense of belief without actual action. Obama gave us the most hope in the world. But what came from that hope? So hope without action is very dangerous, and it becomes this trap that is used to pacify people from being completely dissatisfied, because 100% dissatisfaction brings about 100% change. And so Malcolm X famously said that if we don't hate it, and hate is a very strong word, but if we don't hate it, we will tolerate it. And think about time today. Aren't we tolerating it?